retirement planning, financial planning, there's nothing instant about it. You have to think long term. And so we're fighting this battle. And, I have a lot of people who tell me, well, I'm not going to worry about it now. I'll worry about it 10 years or 20 years from now. I said, well, what's going to happen when you're 60 or 70 and you run out of money? You can't magically come up with $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. It's impossible. I tend to use the analogy with health because everyone understands exercising and health. If you started tomorrow and you said, I need to lose 10 pounds, you can be disciplined and you can do it in about 3 months or 4 months, whatever it may be. You can't do that with money. I know too many people who are closing their eyes and saying, oh, it's not my problem. I'm well off. I go, well, what kind of a society do you want to live in? We need to lift everybody up and empower everyone so we're all okay.
This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Saijal Patel wants you to know that women are 80% more likely to live in poverty in retirement. This is terrible. Seriously, why is anyone living in poverty in retirement? If someone's retired, that means they've either worked at a job or a business their whole life or supported someone else who did in one way or another, and this person now gets to live in poverty? Why is this acceptable? Well, Saijal doesn't think it's acceptable. She started a company called Saijal where she helps women build the right money mindset and skills so they can own their financial independence and achieve true financial wellness. And the thing about Saijal is that she comes from the business world and knows how to talk to businesses as well as individuals. She knows that the system itself needs to be changed, and one of her mandates is to encourage businesses to build effective financial wellness programs. Financial wellness takes a village, and everyone has to be on board. Individuals, companies, the media, and the financial industry. There's a shift in the way personal finance is being delivered to the public, and Saijal is leading the way by helping reduce the money stigma and shame many women feel every day. Saijal joined me in the studio in Hamilton to tell her personal finance story.
My parents had immigrated from India. So I think I learned about money not by design, really, but by necessity because, it's a typical immigrant story. My parents come to Canada for a better future for their kids. They're struggling. It's all about saving. But not just saving, it's saving for the future, but it's also sending money back to their extended family.
Yeah, that's usually how it happens, right? Is that an expectation or just sending money home?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
pretty... And depending on where you are, like my dad was the eldest of 8.
Oh,
so
okay, yeah.
there was that expectation. He was the first person to ever leave India.
Oh, really?
To Canada.
Of the family. And
right.
What were they doing for work? What kind of work could they find when they came over?
It was, blue collar. I grew up in northern Manitoba.
So northern Manitoba. Okay, well let's pause there. So
yeah.
Why northern Manitoba? Where exactly?
Thompson,
so
Manitoba.
So you come to Canada. Is that just where they had a place to go?
Yeah, well, my dad actually went to Saskatoon or Saskatchewan first, and then the nickel mine had opened up in Manitoba. Okay. So they were recruiting, and so my dad went there. And
so he was a miner.
He was a miner. He was an underground mechanic.
Okay.
For the big machinery.
So your dad spent most of his days underground, like
he did.
Taking the elevator all the way down to whatever level.
Yeah, he did for 20 some years. Yeah.
It's not, I'm from the north. I'm from Timmins, so
okay, so that's the
mining. And I was born in Sudbury. Sudbury's the nickel capital with the big nickel, right?
That's right.
But I've been down in the elevators, but I can't imagine what it's like to work. My Uncle Eric, he worked in the mines early on. I mean, you don't get to do it forever, right? It's not one of these things. So 20 years and he retired, or
he retired.
Yeah, and he moved on. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
just living there and seeing that, right? Yeah.
Wow.
I think Also because, my parents never sheltered my brother and I from money.
Okay.
Any of the money discussions, we knew at a very young age what money meant, why they were doing what they were doing. They would openly discuss, okay, well, we have to send X amount back to India and we got to save for this. When we buy things, my mom would talk about the prices and oh, well, we can get a better deal here or there. I don't think I appreciated it as much. But what I've realized is a lot of parents do want to shelter their children because they feel like, well, we don't want to burden our children.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
With knowing any of this.
What is
right?
the motivation? Is it like, so there's the one you just said, they don't want to burden their kids with maybe issues that they're having and maybe meeting certain costs or obligations. And is there shame of some kind too? Is it like your parents didn't have this, but a lot of parents,
they do,
or they just feel like it's private and it's not for the family.
Yeah.
Now, is any of this cultural, or is it just family to family? Like, is it more likely for people from India or for the area that your parents are from to widely share their finances?
I would say depending maybe where you are in terms of wealth, right? So if you are struggling, I think you openly talk about a lot of that. And culturally, yes, most of my friends who have Indian parents or are from Indian culture, not just Indian culture, even the Chinese culture,
So
just the Asian
open.
Culture, we're a lot more open.
So it's
partly
partly culture in that there's already openness there, and then there's this idea of if you're struggling, maybe you wouldn't want to let your kids know so much about that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, just let's talk about money.
Yeah.
And
let's
I like
talk about it. No, I mean, I didn't feel like they were really struggling. We didn't feel like we were, we weren't starving. My parents would buy us gifts. They didn't shower us with gifts, but we would take holidays. But we were just very open about that. I think the other factor that probably played into how we grew up was English wasn't my parents' first language. Okay. So when they did get their investment statement or their bank statement, at some point they would say, hey, can you help us make sense of it? So I feel like as a family, we learned about financial planning together.
Interesting.
Like I actually have memories of my brother, I think he was in grade 9 or 10, filling out my parents' tax return.
There's so many things that are hard for immigrants, right? And finances,
we don't realize,
it's one of the primary ones. I just had Nico Barraweed on. His parents came over from Philippines, and he's working on international credit score, the one that travels between countries, right? Because when they came over, they were both doctors. Well, they were both medical residents at the time, and they became doctors in California. And still, their credit, they couldn't get like a loan or anything, even though they were doctors. Like if a doctor can't get a loan, I mean...
Because you need a credit history, and why would you have one if you're just moving?
Like it's just so backwards, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so obviously your parents wouldn't have any ability to get credit at the time too, I'm sure. And so they had to take whatever they got in terms of housing and...
Yeah. And I mean, they didn't really believe in debt. Oh, that's another very cultural thing and
that's an amazing thing.
Debt.
What happened in North America where debt is not only everywhere, but it's like praised. It's like if you go into debt to buy something,
I think this is one of the biggest problems that we're having in North America. It's not a cultural. I mean, it probably is a cultural thing, but. I lived in Asia for 11 years and I've just come back.
Spoiler.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. I came back a few months ago and it's just a very different philosophy there. You don't take on debt. Now, the younger generation, the millennials and probably younger, are starting to get into credit card debt there. You're starting to see it. But, my parents were very anti-debt and they are still anti-debt.
And they pass it on to you?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I still have. I'll take debt if I need to, and obviously, I'm looking for a home right now, so I'm going to have to take a bit of a mortgage.
That's a necessary debt,
right? But I remember buying a car, and I was short a bit of money, and my dad said, and I happened to mention, well, I'll get a loan or I'll use my line of credit. And he said, absolutely not. If you're going to borrow money, you're going to borrow it from me and you can pay me interest, but you're not paying the bank interest.
Okay.
So he was just very adamant about it.
But also maybe saving up if it wasn't something so big.
Yeah.
If, I want this thing now, that wouldn't have existed.
No. And that's also what my parents taught us, right? Said, if you can't afford it, you don't buy it.
So your early money memory is basically like you just learned about money because you had to.
Yeah, we had to, and as a family, we discussed it.
Yeah, I like that.
Believe it or not, I remember telling somebody I started my first job when I was 16, and I opened an RSP.
At 16.
At
so
16.
Do you know what is the earliest age someone can do that?
You can do it as soon as you start earning income.
So like if you have a social insurance number, probably. Yeah. Which my son, who's going to be 6 weeks old, he has
Get
one.
him started, Bob.
No, they have this like 5-in-1 application when the baby's born.
Yeah.
And one of them is a social insurance number. I'm like, what does he need this for?
Amazing.
Like what, baby modeling or something? I don't know.
See? Earned income.
Wow.
I wonder if he could start.
I mean,
Probably.
that's like, seriously. We're going to put, I don't know, I'll open up a corporation and put some shares in his name.
Yeah.
Whatever I can do legally with this social insurance number, if they want me to have it, if they want him to have it so early. Because I thought it was like 14 or 15 that.
I'm amazed.
How early do you remember when did you start working at 16 or earlier?
No, I think it was 16.
16, and that's when you started. What did you do?
I worked at Walmart.
Okay. Just general, like what, cash or greeter or all of the above, stock?
It had in different departments and then sometimes as a cashier.
What made you want to do Walmart?
It was just a job that I got and... Yeah.
What was available? Did you apply to other, because a lot of people start in fast food. I always have these conversations. I didn't work in fast food, but it gives you, and so does Walmart, a lot of perspective about customer service.
It does. And I knew I couldn't be a waitress because I can't remember orders, and I'm sure I would have dropped a lot of dishes.
Yeah, so those are the two key things.
That was just not for me.
Carrying trays and remembering orders. Yeah. Okay. So Walmart
was a safer bet.
And do you happen to remember the wage at the time?
I'm guessing probably $8 or $9.
This was after school job or weekends?
Yeah, after school, I think a couple of days a week, and then weekends.
But you made enough to open up an RSP account.
I did.
And what did you? It's a good time to talk about our RSP account. Is just a shell. What did you put in the shell?
I did buy a mutual fund. My parents had an advisor at Sun Life.
Okay, yeah.
So I remember telling my parents, well, I should probably put some money away for my retirement. Yes, I'm only 16, but, I should think
those
long
words
term.
Came out of your mouth, really, at the time?
Yeah,
I'm going to retire someday, I'm sure.
Someday, down the road. So my parents brought their advisor in, and she helped me.
So would it have just been a lump sum, or were you like regular contributions? Did you keep it going, or?
It was lump sum. I remember that. And I think I didn't do dollar cost averaging at the time. I think I just put in a lump sum, and then a couple of times I would top up.
Do you have an opinion on lump sum versus dollar cost averaging, and now that it's come up? Because I will always say, spread it all out, right? Because then you don't have any risk. But some people have done studies that lump sum is just as good.
So I've heard that too. Lump sum. If you're trying to time the market, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
I think where the benefit is for dollar cost averaging is getting into the habit of doing it, right? I mean, that's the hard part is we procrastinate.
Yes.
Think, I'll put it away. I mean, think about RSP seasons and everyone's chasing. They're trying to meet the deadline. I'm thinking, why didn't you do this earlier? But it's human nature. We get busy and we mean well and we don't
People
do it.
People need incentives
right.
Yeah.
So by dollar cost averaging, you're just not thinking about it. You've set something up. It's coming out of your bank account and you're contributing, and before you know it, hey, you have this money and you're not really trying to time the market, because obviously that's very difficult to do.
Well, and just to explain, as we call it dollar cost averaging, because it's averaging out your money, right? So if something's worth, a stock is like $100, or let's say an ETF, because I don't want people going and buying one stock. So an ETF price is like $100 per share of the ETF. and every month you put in 100, and next month it goes down to 98. Well, you can buy a little bit more of that with your 100, and then the next month, well, it goes to 102. Well, you're buying a little bit less, and it averages out over time.
Right.
Meanwhile, if you just put it all in when it was 102, let's say, right, and then next month it goes down, well, now your 102 is worth 100, and you just lost money. You don't have the opportunity to buy more of it with your same amount of money.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so by spreading it out, it takes away the emotions, right?
Takes away the emotions.
And like you said,
that's the thing.
People are waiting. People are like, oh, I'm not. I've actually heard people like, oh, I'm waiting for the right time to put the money in. Because for what time? The time is now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they've done studies of this, and I wouldn't know the exact number, but Tony Robbins has actually talked about this.
Sure.
And if you had missed, I think it was past 10 years, if you had missed 4 of the top days, you would have been down like 20 or 30%. I mean, just by trying to play the market. So it's one of those very difficult things to do.
So just go regular automate, set it and forget it is what I like to say.
Yeah,
right?
Because you're getting into the habit. I think that's the most important thing is you're getting into the habit of putting money away. These are things I teach in workshops. Absolutely. Because we typically tend to save after we've spent. And I said, you have to do it the other way around.
Yeah, other way around.
Yeah. Save and treat it like it's an expense.
Yeah.
Put it away, and then you won't feel as guilty spending the rest. I mean, I'm like, do whatever you want with the rest. Spend it if you want. But as long as you're putting away 10, 15, 20%, whatever it is of your income, pay yourself first, right? You're just long term, you're that and investing it, you're going to be so much further ahead, and you wouldn't have even had to think about it.
No, you don't even think. Do people know this and then don't do it, or they just don't know? Pay yourself first.
I don't think a lot of people do know. I mean, it might be different here. I don't know, but there's I've had conversations and they're like, what is that? So I explain this concept to them.
Where did it come from? Where did the spend all your money and then save whatever's left come from? Is it TV and all the media telling us to spend, and then if you have some left over, then you can save?
I don't think it's designed that way. I just think, I had this conversation not that long ago, and I said, think about where we are today versus where we were at least when I was 10 or 11, right? I mean, going back to my parents. Yeah. So they had a black and white TV.
Sure.
They had 2 channels.
Oh, what decade is it? Just so we don't know, it's not 1950s.
70s.
It's the 70s. So black and white. That's rare.
I'm still aging myself.
In the 70s, a black and white TV would have been rare.
No such thing as internet. No such thing as cell phone. No such thing as cable. My parents, luxury was eating out once a week, which we did. And that was about it. Fast forward to today, and we have Netflix, we have cable, we have internet, we have smartphones,
Uber Eats,
and a plan, and then all our kids need cell phones. And think about the costs that have added up. This is not just inflation. This is that it's just ballooned. And I would argue this day and age, we do need internet. Sure. Maybe not a smartphone, but we probably need a cell phone these days. We need to be connected
in some way.
So sometimes we don't think about how much expenses have actually gone up, and our wages have not kept up. And then we wonder why we're struggling. Mm-hmm. Then on top of that, we have on our phone, you gotta have coffee outside, and you gotta do this, and you gotta experience this food and spend this, and so we're inundated. And
it's all normalized, like all this excess.
Yeah.
I drive Uber, right? I started in September. I've done probably 350 trips with Uber. Some of those,
and how is it?
Very few of those were Uber Eats because I did not enjoy that part of it. I love Uber. I drive people in the morning. Yeah. The money's fine. It's really just a nice way to talk to people.
Right.
And I like that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. But Uber Eats is, what I've noticed is it's people who definitely cannot afford this. And it's like you're paying almost double the amount of the item that you're ordering. To get it delivered, it's never more than like 5 minutes away. Like
Right.
it's like I'm driving an hour to deliver somebody like that special pizza that they love, in the city.
Yeah.
This is something that should not exist. And one of my biggest peeves for Uber for riders is kids taking Uber to high school. You're late for school, so you're getting in an Uber.
Wow,
What,
really?
What privilege? What entitlement to think you can take an Uber.
When I was your age, I used to have to walk through 5 feet of
Seriously.
snow in -40.
Have some foresight, have some planning. And if you are late for school, you walk and you be late and learn a lesson.
Yeah.
You don't take an Uber
No.
3 minutes.
But I'll tell you about what's happened is there is so much peer pressure. And when I talk about money too, I really delve into the behavioral part of it because we need to be a lot more mindful of money.
Yes.
We never think about money in that sense. We meditate, and there's a lot of people who are meditating now, but when it comes to money, we don't think in that way. And I thought if we actually just stepped back a minute and actually just thought about money differently, we would make much wiser choices. Because money's this thing, right? It's a dollar bill or a coin or whatever, but that's actually not what money is. Money is just a manifestation of our values and how we're attaching our values to it. And in today's day and age where we're stressed and we're bombarded with all this noise and information, I get why people say, I'm just too tired. I'm going to order Uber. It's convenience. Yeah. We're sold that, it should be convenient, but we're not actually thinking about the ramifications of that.
Can
or the
I
implications,
afford this,
right?
first of all? And what is this doing? Like why? And what's causing you to want to be this way? If we go dig a little deeper, maybe it's because you're working a job you don't like, or you're working too much, or you're unhappy and you're not dealing with that either. But that's another story. We can talk about that.
Well, we are in an era of instant gratification, and this is what worries me because retirement planning, financial planning, there's nothing instant about it. You have to think long term. And so we're fighting this battle. And, I have a lot of people who tell me, well, I'm not going to worry about it now. I'll worry about it 10 years or 20 years from now. I said, well, what's going to happen when you're 60 or 70 and you run out of money? Yeah. You can't magically come up with $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000. It's impossible.
No, you can't.
Very different. I mean, I tend to use the analogy with health because everyone understands exercising and health. I said, look, if you started tomorrow and you said, I need to lose 10 pounds, you can be disciplined and you can do it in about 3 months or 4 months, whatever it may be. You can't do that with money.
No. Yeah, that's you can't accelerate it, right?
No. It's a long-term game.
Compound interest is the key, right?
It's,
or dividend reinvestment.
And it's magical.
It is magical,
it
it really happens. Once you have the big bulk of money, then the magic happens. But you need to build that up first. And we can let's table this. We're going to talk about it a little more later. Let's go back to you. So this is what you know now, obviously, but you didn't always know this. Your parents were obviously frugal and wise with money, and because they had to be, right? They had no choice, and were they saving first? They were saving first, and then keeping the luxuries down, right? Dinner out once a week. So you took this on. It seems, right? This became your personal guide, and you're opening your RSP.
I did.
When you're 16.
My parents had a mantra: save, spend, share.
Save, spend, share. That's
right?
fantastic.
That's great.
So you carried this forward. You're finishing high school. You're still working at Walmart. Did you work at Walmart the whole time?
For a couple of years until I went to university.
You did. So it was all high school. Yeah. Okay. So then you went to university. Where'd you go, and how was it paid for? Went to University of Manitoba. Okay. In Winnipeg. Big city. Big city. Boy, was that a big city compared to Thompson. I was like, wow. How was it paid for? My parents helped. My brother was there already, so we had a house. It was my uncle's house. So we had a place to live. We shared that. He was in med school, so I barely ever saw him. Okay. But, and I used whatever my savings was for spending, pretty much. But my parents did help. So they helped, because tuition. I suppose by this point, your dad has been in the mining business for a while. Yeah. And underground, he's probably making okay money. Yeah. 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 So it's not like he was struggling. They started early. They came over. They had to build it all up, send money home. But after a while, mining money is good money. It's just hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like danger pay.
Again,
right?
Asian family, you invest in your kids' education.
Yeah. Did they do RESPs or whatever? They just put money aside.
I don't know.
I think
RESPs
RESPs
didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't exist.
But whatever.
I'm aging myself, but they didn't exist.
No,
back then.
for a lot of people, early days, I don't even know. I meant to look this up because the last time I talked to somebody about it, we weren't sure when they started. But you could have just put money in something, right? And may pay the tax on it, I guess.
Right.
But they put money away for you. Okay, so they paid your tuition, and you were working during school?
I wasn't.
No.
They were very much
They didn't want that.
focused on school. But I did work every summer.
Okay, and you didn't do Walmart?
No, different jobs. I
Sure.
worked. I love telling this. I worked at a golf course, a private golf course.
Okay.
I used to cut the lawn.
Oh,
believe it or
really?
not.
Nice.
I remember I was the only female there, and I was like, I want to be outside. And I remember being interviewed. He's like, "Are you sure you want to work here?" There's like 20 guys. I go, "Yep." Sure, I can do this. If a guy can do this, I can definitely do this.
Awesome. Yeah, of course.
And I dragged my best friend along and said, "You're going to have to work with me because I really don't want to be the only girl there."
Sure.
And yeah, it was a great job. So I did that. I worked at the university 1 year in admissions.
Okay. But that's all little skills from these jobs, right? Part-time, like the Walmart, obviously, the customer service. That's apparently really big for when you're about to start out in the world, right?
Absolutely.
The perspective for that. And then admissions sounds more like you got some office admin type,
a little bit more analytical
experience.
for sure, and you're fielding calls from people.
Yeah, and landscaping, mowing the lawn. It's like that's like hard labor. A lot of us don't do physical jobs or have never done a physical job if we've always had like knowledge work.
Yeah,
and we don't know what that's like.
I always had the attitude of nothing was beneath me.
Yeah.
Go in
Great
and
attitude.
do your best.
Sure.
And do it with pride and learn something from it. There's every job out there.
You're learning
you can learn something from.
You're always going to take something, even if you hate it. Any bad jobs in there?
No,
or
I
not
don't
so
really,
good ones? I guess you would remember.
That. I actually enjoyed all of them.
That's good. Well, it's because of your attitude.
I mean, I'd like to think so.
I don't know if you had the option of not enjoying it. If you go in with that attitude, you're just going to be like, yeah, this is it. And, I'm going to learn something from this. Hey, I learned that. Yeah. And some people are like, oh, being outside, I get sunburn and this or that. I got heat exhaustion, from one. I'm allergic to grass. I couldn't do that. Not all summer. I can be out. I can have fun. I can do things. But if I had to do that for work, not possible.
I learned a lot about a golf course and how it's put together and maintaining it.
Did you pay attention to the back end, all of that stuff too? Yeah. So you're picking it all up. Okay, so what did you take in school?
I took finance.
Okay, and why?
I took finance and accounting.
How did you know? Did you take accounting and finance in high school?
No, I didn't. Here's what's interesting. I was going into thinking I was going to be a pharmacist.
Oh, interesting.
And then
okay.
I thought, this is really boring. I just can't imagine me being a pharmacist. And no offense to any pharmacist.
My wife
is
a pharmacist.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, no offense. I have family members and really good friends who are.
Yes.
It just wasn't me. And
sure, it's not for everybody.
No. And I just, to be honest, I thought, well, what's going to be fun and guaranteed that I'm going to be employable? And I thought, business.
No.
Why not?
Work
so I
anywhere.
wasn't actually looking to go into that.
Okay.
But once I started the courses, I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just loved it. I got to tell you, my nephew's taking management right now. He's taking finance, and he doesn't enjoy it at all. And,
really?
And a couple of weeks back, we were going through his old exam, and I was like, I was explaining it to him. I said, I can't believe I still remember all of this stuff. But I loved it.
So when you say finance, just for everybody listening, what does that specifically mean? Because there's a lot of different ways to look at business, especially.
Right. Corporate finance, economics.
So was it analyzing, looking at businesses specifically?
Yeah, a lot of it was looking at businesses.
Analysis.
And accounting as well.
Yeah.
Right.
It all just kind of folds in there. Right?
Yeah.
I took a general business degree and I focused in accounting.
Right.
So it's right there on the wall.
There we go.
Bachelor of Administrative and Commercial Studies.
University.
So I'm really good with
Western.
Excel.
Right.
I went to Western, and I got this registered retirement consultant designation thing too, which really just means I know a little bit more about, just the things that happen in retirement.
Well, see, that's interesting, right? Because personal finance is not taught.
Yeah, it's
not part of a management. At least when I was there.
Oh yeah, none of this was
part
personal. It was like a manufacturing business.
Yeah,
like I took
management accounting,
a strategy class on how to operate supply chain.
Right,
and I'm like. Well, okay, but I don't know how to balance my checkbook at the time. It's like, how are we learning this, but not the one hand and not the other?
It
Why?
is my biggest pet peeve.
Absolutely,
that this is not taught in high schools.
Yes,
the reason it's not taught is because teachers don't feel comfortable teaching it. Teachers usually don't know this stuff either.
Yeah, of course. But
not,
what if they're
I'm
running
not even
from
pointing at teachers? Most people don't know this stuff.
But what if they have a workbook and just like they might not love geography, but
maybe
they're teaching
maybe.
that.
I think Ontario had started it at some point,
yes,
and I don't know where it stands now.
There's some funding in the last couple of years, moving in the right direction.
It needs to be taught. It's a basic life skill,
but not enough. And I think the biggest thing is they're not really in the right mind, the frame of mind, to absorb that stuff at that time. Teach it all you want in high school, but it's later in life when they're going to really be listening. And so that's why we are still needed. That's why you are still needed, right? Anything about financial literacy is still needed at different stages of life, because you might be 35 or 40 before you're like, I really should kind of crack down on this. Did I learn anything about this? I don't know. I don't remember.
Oh, it's interesting that you say that, because I think the first step is tackling the behavior part.
So if we get that done.
And perhaps that's a bit of it might cause some problems in high school, because, teachers may say, well, this is the way it is and it should be. And then they go home and the parents are saying,
well, that's it.
That's not what we believe in.
We need buy-in from all sides, right?
You do. They've done studies about this as well. They said you can teach children financial literacy, but if they're going home and their parents are modeling something very different, you're not actually going to have the impact. So you actually need to create a program that gets the family involved.
But then we got to get rid of the stigma of even just discussing sharing, like discussing salary. I don't know if did your parents go that far? Did you know how much they make?
I knew exactly what
right.
They made.
And I've had other guests say that too, and that's surprising to me, because my dad was a dentist, right? I could have an idea of how much, but I wouldn't ask him. That was like kind of programmed into me. You don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to deprogram everybody.
Yeah.
What's the problem?
There such a stigma and shame
and if somebody makes more money or less money than you, now of course where it's really important is if we all start talking about it, then maybe we'll get rid of this wage gap that's happening, right?
Yeah.
And it'll all be brought to light. And I know a couple of companies in the States have actually done that, some wage audits. One of the big tech companies did it, found, and then sort of equalized the salaries, found that there was a wage gap. Like, here's some concrete evidence. Let's talk about it, right?
Yeah. When you demand transparency, you'll quickly see how things change.
And so is it that? Is it whoever's trying to maintain the wage gap is, they're holding on to their privacy, right? If it all came out, then would it's like the world would explode or something.
It's because we're in a society that judges people, rightly or wrongly, by how much money they make. If they don't make enough, it's their shame or stigma. If they make too much, it's like, oh, look at that person, they're arrogant. And I go back to what I was saying. It has nothing to do with that. I know very, very wealthy people who are incredibly generous and in fact sometimes feel bad that they have come into this wealth and do whatever they can to help their community. And then you can see the opposite. So I agree with you. I think we have to erase the shame and the stigma. There's stats out there or research that shows we rather talk about sex and death before we'll talk about money. Yeah. I know so many couples. I've had so many women and men actually come up to me and say, I will not discuss money with my spouse. I go, but you live under the same roof. And how are you supposed to reach the same financial goals or life goals if you're not discussing it? So we don't talk about it.
Well, the comedian Ali Wong, she's a head writer for the series Fresh Off the Boat. I don't know if you ever saw
I haven't
one.
seen it. But
it's really funny, really funny. But she has stand up. She's always pregnant when she does her stand-up. She has 2 stand-up HBO specials, and she's pregnant both times.
Funny.
But she did not know that her husband had tons of school debt. Like, they got married, and then she found out. And because she was a high-paid TV writer, she paid it off. I think that's what the story is. She took care of it.
Yeah.
And but like what a thing.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't bring that into a marriage. I think third date, second date. What do you think? When do you start talking about money?
Oh, I think past the third. When it's getting
I'm a little
serious,
extreme.
maybe.
I'm
but,
like,
yeah.
I'm putting it all on the table, right?
Yeah,
Well, 'cause
I think because it's been my world.
Sure.
I've openly talked about it with
Yeah, I guess
people I've dated, and
we're
they've told
different.
me. I've always known what.
Well, when you open
the
up, then they
situation.
open up.
Yeah.
But you don't think people should be compelled to when it's getting serious. That's the rule.
Think, yeah, I would say that's a safe bet.
Okay, that's a
Because sometimes it can be a deal breaker, Bo.
well. But wouldn't you want to know now?
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah. What do you mean? I went on how many days
right?
and
Like
wasted
what a
how many
waste,
years
right?
and-
Oh, because I had a gambling addiction. I was in a lot of
Yeah.
debt. I was, I had a terrible credit rating when I met my wife.
Yeah.
And it took another 4 years for, I was back in net positive by that point, paying it off, saving money, building a positive net worth. But only 4 years after we met did my credit rating, get erased, or the consumer proposal get erased from my credit report. And then it's just like this empty space, which is what the bankers are like, what is this? But they don't know because it's gone, right?
Yeah.
And then the credit rating goes way back up. If you wait until you're both going to apply for a mortgage together to talk about this stuff, I would have to say, you can't use my credit. Like, you'd be better off applying for a mortgage entirely by yourself because I will bring you down. I don't know.
I think it's really important to talk about it, but also
Whenever it
it's
makes
also
sense.
understanding that all of us have money personalities. We bring certain baggage in. We hold on to certain values that money brings. I always say, well, think about how we judge people. We're like, why did that person buy that car? That was a waste of money. And then someone else will go on a vacation and think, why did you do that? Like, we all have it. And so it's important to understand where that came from. And most often, that came from a very young age.
Yeah.
We developed our values based on what we saw with our parents or our friends. And it determined how we were going to place those values and how we were what kind of relationship we would have with money. It starts at a very, very young age.
So it's not school.
It's not.
It's not school that's the problem.
No.
Because like you said, if they come home from school and the parents aren't lined up, then it doesn't matter. It's let's educate the parents on how to talk to their children about money.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that like what that plus school? Then that would be the complete package.
Yeah.
And then we continue with what we're doing in adulthood, and they'll be like, yeah, I learned those, like you said, the behavior. I learned those early, so this makes sense to me, what you're saying.
Well, think about this. I said I lived in Asia for 11 years. It's very hard to find personal finance experts there.
Really?
Yeah. You can't really go to a bookstore and say, find a wealth management for dummies or some kind of...
Is that true? Okay, I
it's
didn't
quite
realize
difficult.
that.
And yet they don't have a debt problem.
Yeah, okay.
You
Is
know?
that why then?
Yeah.
Because they don't need
Well, maybe.
they don't need
I
us.
don't know. Here, I'm fascinated that we have all the tools. We have robo-advisors. We have,
There's
it's not
everything.
like there where, you have to have a minimum $1 million before a banker even talks to you. It's very much geared towards high net worth people. Here, you can
It's
go to
all
a
open
bank.
now.
You have a lot of options. And yet we're struggling here, which tells me it's not literacy.
Oh.
And,
Yeah.
I mean, it's available. You can find it online.
There-
There's
people are
lots
just
of
not
great
doing it.
information online.
Yeah.
It's behavioral. And often what I'm told is, they said, look, we know there's a lot of information out there, but it's just overload. Like, I don't know how to make
Sure.
sense of all this
Sure.
information. And where do I start?
Yes.
So when I design my workshops for
Yes.
women, I walk them through. Like, here's how it's applicable to your life.
Yes.
This is how you have to think about it, and then you make the decision. But I'll actually show you step by step what you could do. And you're not going to learn everything, but my objective is to get them interested in money and be able to apply their own situation to financial planning and vice versa.
Okay, so let's just continue with your life, and we're going to get to you're living in Asia for 11 years. So you graduate with a degree in finance.
Yep.
And you work in Manitoba for a bit, or no?
I did, for an advisor.
Okay,
I
so
worked in the
you got all
retail
your
brokerage firm.
licenses. So you're
I got my licenses.
yeah. So
yes.
what you have some designations or one designation, right?
Back then, you had to get your Canadian securities
Yeah, so
course and
CSC,
your options and whatever else
Mutual
there was.
funds license.
Yeah,
or to
there's
sell?
a few of those. At the same time, I started studying for my CGA.
Okay, yeah,
So,
great.
I always thought I was
I did
going
as
to
well.
Did you?
Well, I
There you
didn't
go.
finish it. I chose not to.
Yeah.
I got right to the end, and it's like no accounting for me.
Yeah, I finished it, and then I didn't keep up my membership because I
There
never
you go.
really used it again. But I did it because I thought I was going to be a portfolio manager.
Okay.
That was always my goal. I was going to run money.
For
I
for
loved-
individuals.
for big companies,
Big
right?
companies,
Like
yeah, okay,
run
so-
a mutual fund.
Okay,
or something like that.
you're managing the portfolio of securities
Yeah.
inside a fund. Is
That
what you
was
mean?
my aim.
Yeah, okay.
That was my goal. So I thought, well, sure, you should be able to understand a balance sheet and everything else
yeah.
if you want to study
Accounting
companies
is
and what they're
applicable
doing.
to everything.
It really is. So I started studying that, and I remember a broker telling me, well, why do you want to do that? Why don't you become an advisor? And I loved being an advisor. I loved talking to people
Yeah.
about their money and helping them and understanding what mattered to them. To be honest, the only reason I didn't do it is I thought, well, if I start building a book, I'm going to be stuck in Winnipeg.
That's it, right?
It's like, I don't want to be stuck in Winnipeg.
And at that time,
Mm.
we're not talking about like online, remote. It's not that
No,
easy, right?
no.
So like today, I can move
Right.
anywhere and keep coaching clients with me because
Exactly.
I do it online anyway.
Yeah.
Right? We don't even meet in person,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter. But so yeah, I hear you though, right? Fixed
So
place.
I had, the big dream. I was like, I'm going to move to New York or Toronto or somewhere. So I ended up studying that and then eventually getting my CFA
Okay,
designation.
so that's chartered financial analyst.
Yes. And then I moved to Toronto to work in equity research.
Wow, what does that mean?
It's analyzing companies
Okay.
and making
For
the
whom?
call on, it was for Bank of Montreal,
Okay.
BMO. And
Making the call about what?
whether you should buy a stock or
Sure.
sell a stock, looking at
Internally?
a company. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So it, Excel and models and,
Sure.
and talking about all of that. So that was, I don't know how much I really enjoyed it. I think it was probably the sector I was in, which was pipelines and utilities, which was a little bit boring.
So you're behind the scenes for
Yeah.
this. So you go from financial advisor working with people to behind the scenes. Nobody sees you. I picture a closet or something, but no, you're just in a cubicle probably.
I would talk to portfolio managers
Sure.
about it, but that was it.
That's it, right? But
became-
nobody
it
on
was
the outside.
institutional. Right.
And then somehow you go from there to being on TV in Asia.
I always thought journalism was a very noble profession, but I loved the business side of it.
Yeah.
I loved the finance. So I had a friend one day, I was traveling and he called me and he said, hey, BNN
Yeah,
is looking for a producer. Do you want to do it?
in Canada.
In Canada. I thought, well, he said, well, I'm warning you, it's like half the pay, less than that. But I just thought, you know what? Why wouldn't I try it? I'll
But you
try
don't have
it.
any background in TV or anything.
No, nothing.
But they
But
like
I
the
knew
finance
business.
part. So
But I knew
that was
business.
more important
Yeah.
at the time. Interesting.
Yeah. And so I learned the other skills. But
Okay.
what I found was when I was actually doing the research packs for the anchors
Yeah.
and putting the questions, the feedback I was getting from the anchors were saying, wow, you really know this stuff. Like
Okay,
the
yeah.
CEOs are telling me I just asked the best questions. So they started depending on me. And I thought, yeah,
Ooh.
well, maybe I should be on
Sure.
air, which was crazy at the time because I was one of the shyest people.
Yeah,
you would
yeah,
ever-
like-
you wouldn't guess now
No.
that I was, but the thought of being on TV, I just wanted to throw up just thinking about
Well, that's so funny that you would
Yeah.
you would go for. Well, why would you go for it if you were so shy? It was
I
just
think because
challenging?
I felt like I had something to give. You know,
Sure. Okay.
I had a viewpoint. I understood this stuff, and it was a great medium to be able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I did that, and then I ended up getting a job at CNBC in Singapore, being a correspondent there for 6 years, covering Asian markets.
How does Singapore come up? Like, how do you go from one country to another? How does that happen?
I applied.
You just apply to
I
it.
applied, thinking it was a long shot because it was CNBC, which was, kind of my dream job. And I got it.
Wow.
Yeah, I got it. I mean, the feedback was they could train me up on the on the on-air.
Yeah.
Although they had seen what I was like because I sent them a demo tape. But they knew I knew my business stuff. And they said, you know more than most of our anchors. So,
okay.
yeah. So I knew I had that edge.
So that's the most important thing, it seems, then.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously you would have to have a voice and personality as well,
of course.
and things
Yeah.
like that too. If your demo tape was terrible, I'm sure it wouldn't have the
Right.
business stuff wouldn't have overridden everything.
Yeah.
But so you moved to Singapore.
I moved to Singapore.
And
it's
you
terrifying.
You were in Singapore
6 years.
6 years, and
Yeah.
then where after that?
I came back thinking I was going to stay.
Yeah.
I thought I was away long enough, and I was missing my family. I was anchoring at BNN. So I was back at
Okay.
BNN again. But, at the time, I knew that the whole journalism industry, it was changing.
Yeah.
And not necessarily for the better. So I knew I had a shelf life. I knew I wanted to get back into the industry in some capacity. So I was figuring that out. And then Manulife came knocking and said, "Hey, do you want to run our PR in Asia? You have to come back to Hong Kong." And I thought, well, here it's a big insurance and wealth company. Sure. So I went back and I did that. And it was obviously a very different skill set. I'm learning
Because you don't
communications.
have PR experience either. Like
Yep.
it's like all of this stuff is really peripheral, right?
Uh-huh.
It's like, sure, yeah, you're communicating with the public about business on TV,
Yeah.
but that's not technically PR. But it helps with a PR job.
It does.
And
Yeah.
knowing your stuff obviously helps with all of these jobs.
Yeah. And often
Just so
communication
interesting.
in the strategy part, you do have to understand a company's strategy.
That's it.
And how
Yeah.
the communication piece fits into conveying their strategy.
But and also we shouldn't forget that you have a business degree and you're a chartered financial analyst.
Right.
So all of this stuff helps people too. Like people could get jobs just
Yeah.
with those things too, right?
Yeah.
So it all just kind of adds up. So now you're in PR at Manulife for is that the last job? Or
Yeah, 3.5 years.
And then you moved back to here.
Yeah, well, I
We
started
don't have
my
to say
business.
where you live. I was going to say the town.
Here,
I'm not going to
yeah.
reveal. Here in Canada.
Here in Canada.
It's big.
It's big. Oh.
But in the meantime, you're starting
I started
your
this business. Yeah.
Yes. And
it was something that I had been in my mind for a very, very long time.
So about 55 minutes in, you can say the name of the business.
I can say the name. Yeah.
About time.
So Sage L.
Yeah, Sage
which is a play on wise women.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
I like that.
Right.
But
And my name.
And your name.
And
right?
my name.
Exactly.
Sajal.
Sajal. Yeah.
And then
okay.
Sage L.
Yeah, it's so close.
Two different
I
words.
like
Yeah.
it. I like it.
Yeah, because, in the back of my mind, everything I was doing leading up to this, Bo, was I realized that there was a huge gap in the media industry, in the financial industry, in really helping people reach financial security, right?
And you were talking globally, but you noticed it
it's
locally
globally.
where you were.
Yeah,
but
it was just
everywhere.
globally.
Yeah.
Just because the industry is designed, I mean, you're taking care of your investors, your shareholders first. I hate to say it, but that's the reality of it. And you're starting to see this shift now that they're like, well, no, we have to think about our customers because that eventually will lead to profits and what matters for them. And so I thought, I really want to use all my skills. So the financial skills, the journalism skills, speaking, even the PR and the communications and the strategic stuff that I had learned at Manulife and elsewhere, of putting something together where I can really help. In my case, I chose women.
Yes.
That's the niche I've gone after for many reasons. Women are uniquely challenged, and we talked about the wage gap.
Yeah.
So they make less, they live longer. They typically, I like to use the term financial capability because it's not just literacy, as we've talked about. It is behavior, confidence, how much we engage with the financial services industry. And on all of those fronts, women like men. And by the way, men aren't great at this either. If you actually look at the stats, they're not fantastic. They're not rock stars by any means, but women do lag men.
Okay.
In all of them. And yet, when you think about all of those challenges, because they are saving less, they're entitled to less pension, they're 80% more likely than men to live in poverty during retirement.
Oh, wow.
And yet a lot of women don't know this.
And of course, in today, if anyone's heading to retirement today, they started in a time when the patriarchy was rampant,
Yes.
and they didn't even have really much of a
Yeah.
choice in any of this.
Yeah.
And I saw a little bit of your YouTube video where you were talking about someone whose husband died,
Mm-hmm.
and the husband was taken care of. You know, like, it doesn't even have to be husband-wife sort of situation.
No.
If somebody else is taking care of all of your money, that's no good,
You're
right?
vulnerable.
You're vulnerable.
You
And then
really
something
are vulnerable.
happens to them, or you disconnect in some way with that person, and
Yeah.
now you don't know how to pay a bill.
Yeah.
What
It's scary.
a terrible thing to think about.
It
Everyone should
really
be
is
empowered in that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of part of your motivation as well.
It is. I tell people all the time, no one's going to care about your money more than you.
Yeah,
No one.
that's right.
Not your spouse, not your parents, not your kids. No one.
But it's comfortable if you don't like finances.
Yeah.
If you actually are like, oh, I hate this, for whatever reason that may be, to give it to somebody else and be like, yeah, you take care of
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it, until you realize what's happening.
And there's nothing wrong with having someone to take care of it. I
Okay,
say
yeah.
if you have a partner and you decide in this case, say it's he,
Sure.
and he wants to run it, fine. But you still need to know.
Understand. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to know where it is. A
Yeah.
lot of people are like, I have no idea where our money is and what happens. I'm like, what happens if you get divorced or he passes away, or
Yeah.
the divorce rate is 40-50% in Canada.
Right? Yeah.
Sorry, but the stats
So
show
maybe
that you might be taking care of your money at some point.
true. So maybe you say the husband, just to use a traditional heterosexual marriage as an
Mm-hmm.
example here. So there's a husband takes care of like the day-to-day stuff and the minutia and all that kind of stuff, but like maybe once a month, or you talk about it. You talk about it
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And you review. You're like, this is where all the money's at. You don't
Right.
have to do the transactional stuff. I'll take care of that because
Yeah.
you hate it.
It doesn't even have to be once a month.
Whatever.
Once a quarter.
Whenever, yeah, not
Yeah.
even that often,
Yeah.
but just enough to feel
understand.
involved.
Yeah.
So that's just one angle of it. But you're right that in general, you're saying all of this is not great for women. The setup,
No.
the current setup,
No.
is really poor.
And the financial industry has just made it too complicated.
Yes.
And it doesn't need to be complicated. I teach this in workshops, and
Mm-hmm.
it's and I'll tell you, Bo, I have women like in one, I had 28 women come in. Pretty much all of them admitted. There's maybe 2 or 3 that had some general understanding of mutual funds and
Sure.
asset allocation. The rest had no idea. And 2.5 hours later, they felt really empowered. And I got emails 6 months later saying, I've started investing. Thank
Nice.
you. I've started saving. It actually wasn't that difficult. I go, it's not if it's taught the right way. And you make it relatable.
Because words
And-
like asset allocation
right.
is
but
confusing.
then you explain
yeah, then you
what
explain what it is,
right? Take out the jargon.
Yeah.
There's no need for it. I think that's a skill I learned being in TV.
Sure.
Is maybe not CNBC because it's very jargon heavy,
It's
but
supposed to be
BNN
for-
is
yeah.
not. It's
Okay.
really geared towards retail. And I'll never forget one of the anchors that I used to produce for, and I used to use these big words like
Yeah.
maybe asset allocation,
Sure.
but
Sure.
but and he'd say, "What does this mean?" And I remember I rolled my eyes thinking, "Oh my God!" And he said, "Saijal, pretend you are explaining it to a 90-year-old grandmother
Yeah.
whose second language is English.
Oh, there you go.
And if you can't do that, no one's going to understand."
Yeah.
And it really hit me. I thought, you're absolutely right. Like, we sometimes hide behind this jargon. If you can't explain it simply, then you don't know what you're talking about often.
Well, you
So-
probably know Randy Cass then.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so Randy was
We
on
worked
episode
together.
15 of the
Oh,
podcast.
there you go.
And he's like, because he knew we were presenting to, we were talking to regular Canadians, and he does a lot too. But when we were talking about his background, he slipped into the more complicated jargon a little bit, and he said arbitrage, and then he shortened it and he said arb. And I'm like,
What?
no, let's
No,
get out of that, right? So it's like when he said like something about arbing something, I'm like, we're way past, right? I'm thinking in my head, wow, this is I don't know if anyone's going to understand. Yeah, I don't even understand what he's talking about in the context of building funds or whatever it is he did before, right? And so it's easy because we know things. I didn't get my designation, but I got 95% of a CGA in my head, right?
Right. Yeah.
And enough to know that, we were talking about convincing CEOs of a company of the monetary value of a social effort, right? Like something that they started trying to do in the 70s, and we're still doing it now, right? It's like, why do we have to convince people today that caring what their customers think is important?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And realizing that, hey, women can open their own bank accounts without, their husband's permission today. By the way,
I still get those complaints, by the way.
Really?
I had a friend not that long ago. She couldn't get a credit card without her
come
husband
on,
co-signing.
Come on. What, because she doesn't have a credit history or anything? Is that why?
Because
Is there a
she
reason?
started her own business. So they wouldn't give her one. I said, isn't that ironic that a teenager can get a credit card easier than you can? And you know why? Because they're betting that if the teenager gets in trouble, the parents are going to pay it off.
That's right. And, on another tangent about businesses trying to get credit, because I have had Lending Loop on a couple of times, and they try to help Canadian businesses, by it's crowdfunding, right? Canadian businesses, right? And people go to Lending Loop because the banks, they want them to take out a personal loan when they're going for a business loan. And they're more likely to give them a personal loan because of whatever rules are set up for that.
Yeah.
And it's like when they have history and they have profits and they have all of this good stuff, the banks are still tough on them. And it's like, let's help individual Canadians sort of grow. There's so many problems with a lot of things in the Canadian personal finance area or general finance of banks. And one of them is still not knowing how to talk to women.
Yes. Yeah. And we can't fix it unless there is demand from women as well. And this is what I tell a lot of women. I said, listen, I've worked in the industry for a long time. They have a lot of competing goals and priorities. And as much as they know they probably need to do something, it moves to the bottom of the pile until women start being vocal. And the way you be vocal is also be educated on what it is you need and what it is you want and how to actually work with the financial industry. Because collectively, when we actually talk about this, trust me, it goes up the food chain. And somebody starts listening.
Yeah.
But there's no incentive for them to do it out of their kindness of their heart.
That's right.
It just doesn't work that way. And when you understand those dynamics, you can actually enact change.
Yeah. So let's all keep talking about it. What you're talking about is not just good for women, it's good for everyone, right? It's good for guys who aren't that guy who is like, whatever the target market is, for the bank, the guy who just wants to talk about buying stocks and I don't know what it is. Who are they targeting, really?
Typically, men are thinking, okay, we're going to invest, we're going to make a return, and that's it. Women will think much more holistically. So they will look at the different pieces and say, okay, how does that fit into my life goal? I want to retire. I want to pay for our kids' education. How does this product actually fit in? And men usually have very different conversations around that.
Well, I'm a woman in this example. Yeah. Absolutely. I consider, it could be because of that. You're right. And maybe if I didn't have the experience that I went through, maybe I would be thinking more like the stereotypical man in this example. But I just feel like there are less of those guys around. I don't think this person exists so much. I think they're retired. I really, what I mean? They could be. I think they're closer. I think everyone is closer to the example you just gave of how women are. I think everyone is more about holistic these days than they are just about, I'm going to buy some stocks and get me a return, right? And not think about why or what. This is my hope. Maybe this is not the actual truth.
Well, let's hope, because, investing is just one aspect of financial planning.
Absolutely.
And you do have to look at it very holistically, which is, sometimes I do think the financial industry gets a bad rap for the wrong reason. They're not perfect. There's a lot of things I can point the finger at them for. But, without the financial industry, we wouldn't have economic stability. And so when I actually was looking at my business model, I thought, great, I can educate women and empower them. But if they are not comfortable working with the financial industry, we're not making the impact.
Yeah. So
we actually have to bring the two together.
Yes.
Anybody. In my case, it's women, but it's really anyone. We have to start bringing the two sides together and start having constructive conversations about how we're going to fix our financial security gap. And maybe one of them is bringing down the commissions and stuff. Absolutely, it's probably too high. And fintech is actually changing the game now. We know that.
Fantastic.
But there is still a role for advisors. You know, you can't just go in and go on a robo-advisor and think, okay, I'm going to put all my money in there without actually checking off okay, well, have I done the estate planning? Have I done the insurance
That's a
part?
good point.
If you can do it yourself, all the power to you. But just don't ignore it.
No.
And an advisor can help you do that.
That's right. And you're right. Things like tax planning, estate planning.
A good advisor, I'm going to say.
Yeah, a good advisor.
Good advisor.
Because, you're right. Just putting money in an account, even if it's lower fees, even if it's accessible, even if it's not, you don't have to be a millionaire to do it, that doesn't solve everything. Insurance is a big part of this as well, right?
Yeah.
And people don't care about insurance. They want to max out their RSP, but what about maybe they don't even have life insurance and they have kids, or they don't have a disability insurance.
I know a lot of people who don't. I know a lot of people. I think the stat is maybe 50 or 60%, maybe 50% of Canadians don't have a will.
And no will. I don't have one. I mean, I'm still relatively young, but
gotta get on.
I really want to get the people from Willful Wills is a new fintech.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want to get them on. I think that's the name of them.
Oh,
I don't know if I messed that up.
Everyone should have a will.
You go online and make a will. Like, I think it costs $100 and it takes no time.
But there's caveats in how you do that.
Sure. Okay. So there you go. And maybe we could address those.
I honestly think you need a lawyer to do it.
Okay.
It's worth the money.
Good point. Well, they have lawyers on staff, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can maybe talk to on the phone. That's why I want to get them on, because I would like everyone to have a will, including
the mistakes
myself.
That they make.
Yeah. Is a basic will better than no will? You know?
No, because
okay.
if there are holes in it, you're going to have to go to court anyway.
Sure. Okay.
If they can't make sense of what you were actually intending to do, there's too many loopholes.
And with no will, it just, whatever the statutory regulations are, it goes to
you're basically doing the same thing
to your family.
If it's not well done or it's not done, you're basically having to go
I see.
court.
So they would have to go to, and then the court would decide that this is really terribly written, and we're going to do what we would do, and all the money goes to your spouse or children or whatever the lineage is and whatever the basics are. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So no will, no insurance, no, but it was RRSP season. That's important, right? Let's make sure we max that out. Why is so much emphasis on that, right? And not on all of these other things. So I totally agree with you. Holistic management, and I love what you're doing. Just because I love the way that it affects our whole industry as well. Mm-hmm. It's helping women become more financially empowered, I guess is probably the best word to use. I don't want to say literate. I don't want to say confident, because they might be those things already. Mm-hmm. Maybe just the system is in their way, right?
Yeah, I think the end goal
is... It goes?
I think the end goal is we want people to feel financially secure.
Yes,
and right now there are too many people who are at risk of outliving their savings.
Sure.
And I always say this is not an individual problem. The onus can't be just on the financial industry. It's the government plays a role, education system plays a role, the industry plays a role. We as individuals pay the most important role because it's our money. Mm-hmm. And I also say we're in a place right now, and I'll tell you what scares me. When you look at the statistics in Canada and you see 40% of the people who are living paycheck to paycheck or close to debt, this no longer becomes a them versus me problem or a she versus he or rich versus poor. This is a societal problem.
Yeah.
You cannot maintain a society when you have 50% of the population in this situation.
That's right.
And by the way, Bo, they vote. Who are the politicians going to get those votes from? If they need those votes and they say, hey, I want you to raise taxes to 70% because somebody has to fund my lifestyle, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, we're not even thinking about that. And I hate to be the mirror of bad news, but think down the road. I know too many people who are closing their eyes and saying, oh, it's not my problem. I'm well off. I go, well, what kind of a society do you want to live in?
Yeah.
We need to lift everybody up and empower everyone so we're all okay.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. I've always said, I'll pay a bit more taxes if it means, there's a park or somebody doesn't have to live on the street.
Right.
It's probably not going to affect me that much, is it?
No.
But people are just concerned with the bottom line, and I think you're right. That needs to change.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily, I mean, raising taxes isn't going to fix something.
No.
If you're giving somebody money and they're spending it all or not managing it,
Okay, yeah.
that's actually the issue.
Oh, yeah, I know the feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need to have these conversations, and because I really do feel we're all in it together.
Yeah, if somebody would have given me $1 million when I was thick in my gambling addiction, it wouldn't have mattered.
Right.
I would have gambled it all away.
Yeah.
Right? You got to fix the underlying problem. And in this case, it's behavior and
We have to start
the
talking
system.
about it.
It really comes down to that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not why we do these podcasts. It's why you made your business.
Yeah.
It's why you made all those really well done videos. It's your background. Right?
That's why you've had me on, so I
what-
really appreciate that.
Yes.
too,
Well,
to be
no,
able
and
to
thanks
talk
for
about
coming.
this.
Thanks for coming to the studio. This is good, especially since I have a 6-week-old baby.
It's beautiful.
It's hard for
by
me
the
to go
way.
places these days. I mean, I'll go when I have to, but the fact anybody who can make it to the studio is very much appreciated. And I'm probably just going to go to sleep right after this.
Well, great. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
Hey, perfect. And that's episode 77. Again, you can find Saijal at saijel.com, SAIJELLE.com. If this was your first time tuning in, you should check out my 75th episode, where I have 1-minute segments for each of the 74 episodes that came before. It's a quick way to find an episode you might be interested in. If you're a regular listener, thanks so much for downloading the episodes every week. Another way you can support the podcast is by going to my Patreon site and becoming a patron. The link is at the end of the show notes in most podcast apps. Otherwise, just head to patreon.com/BoHumphreys. That's patreon.com. And actually, if you Google Bo Humphreys patron, the link's right at the top. Thanks again to my guest, Saijal Patel, for sharing her personal finance story. I'll be back next week with Owen Winklemolen, founder of Plan Easy.